Hello and welcome to the Girls Fuel podcast. My name is Haley. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition coach here to help you along your health and fitness journey by providing evidence and experience-based knowledge. And as always, full transparency. So today we are going to talk about a topic that affects so many people, but often goes unrecognized before it's too late. We are going to talk about how chronically high blood sugar and insulin resistance can negatively impact your digestion, your gut health, and cause symptoms like bloating, fatigue, or even acid reflux. We're going to go into 5 specific ways that insulin resistance and elevated blood sugar disrupt our digestive system. And that will vary from slowing down digestion, impacting how food moves through, and also causing inflammation, which just makes it a lot harder to feel satisfied by our meals, makes us have a lot more cravings, and also makes us feel pretty shitty. So I know that, Jess, both you and I have pretty personal connections to this. I feel like that's the common theme for all the podcasts that we do because we've been through all the
Yes.
freaking shit and came out the other side. So that's where I am grateful to have had blood sugar issues because we can help people from our experiences and our education, but also
Yes.
we've both been there ourselves. So I would love to hear some signs that you've noticed that your blood sugar was off. And then, but we can even get into testing our blood sugars and things of that nature too.
Yeah, I think the main thing is always either I was always hungry or I wasn't hungry at all. Like I could feel spikes in my energy and I could feel the I guess like high energy, low energy, and just like that
Crash.
switchback all the time. And then I would feel really low blood sugar, like almost like faintish. And it was so weird because I was eating regularly. I was doing all the right things that I was all the healthy things that I was supposed to do. But I continuously felt these like crashes and spells of high energy, spells where I was like really like I would almost be ravenous, so hungry. And I won't get into the nitty-gritty of what I was missing the mark on, but those were the telltale signs for me that really affected my everyday. What were the
Definitely.
signs for you?
I didn't really know that was my issue until I started
Mhm.
pricking my finger every day, which you don't have to do. You do not have to prick your finger and do the blood test every day. We do have some clients do that, but it's rare. So when we're thinking about blood sugar, and I'm going to get into in a second here, like what is insulin resistance? What does it even look like to have high
Yeah.
blood sugar? But with having hyperglycemia or high blood sugar, usually we will feel some sort of symptom, but we don't usually know that's why. So for
Yeah.
years, I had insulin resistance. I had high blood sugar, but I didn't know it. And when I did figure it out, it was a very stressful thing for me because I have a major family history of diabetes. I know a lot of you can relate to this where we're currently afraid of that generational curse of insulin resistance and high blood sugar. Doctors even tell people like, oh yeah, it's in your family, you're going to get it. And that's not true at all. Like the likelihood that I
Yeah.
will have diabetes is very low now because I manage my blood sugar. But I didn't notice that. I didn't know that was why, but I had similar to you. I would be so hungry after eating like a full meal, like so
Yeah.
hungry after
Yeah.
eating a full meal, or I would go like 8 hours without feeling like I needed to eat, and then I would overeat, right? So these can be
Yeah.
signs. Part of it's poor habits, but part of it too, especially the increased hunger after eating, is just a blood sugar response. But also other things that I didn't realize with high blood sugar, so hyperglycemia, I had dry mouth, blurred vision. It can impact your eyesight. Because when we think about what are the extremes of high blood sugar, it's diabetes. What symptoms are associated with diabetes? Vision changes, neuropathy, issues with like nails and toes. Some people might have tingling or numbness, increased infections in the skin and rashes. Obviously, we never want to get to that point. That is very bad. Blood sugar dysregulation. But I know for myself, I did have a couple of those weird things where I would have blurred vision a lot. I already don't have good eyesight. My mouth was always super dry, so increased thirst. And then increased hunger after eating. So I started testing my blood sugars just to learn. I had a coach tell me to do it, and my values were consistently higher than what is optimal. So again, as a reminder, what we think is optimal is going to be different than what your doctor says is normal, quote unquote. So normal ranges for your blood sugar, your doctor will consider, like, I think at something as low as 65, 70, all the way up to 100 to be
Yeah.
maybe even, what do they think, 100 or 120 fasting? I think
Ye- I want to say, yeah,
120 is
100.
considered diabetic.
Yes.
But what we consider, or what I like to see when I'm testing my blood sugar or I'm having a client do it, is between 70 and 90. Low 90s, I'm okay with as long as it's not consistent. Your doctor will consider normal to be less than 99. And then that pre-diabetes, if I'm remembering correctly, is 100 to 125-ish. Diabetes is actually 126. It's not 120. I was wrong there. But basically, we can catch this and avoid diabetes by recognizing when we are dealing with high levels of blood sugar and getting ahead of it. So signs and symptoms, it's not always obvious. For most people, it's not. A lot of people with insulin resistance will also have issues losing weight. That's probably one of the biggest things that I'll see in
Yeah.
clients. They'll come to us and be like, hey, I do all the things. I eat healthy. I don't eat very much, and I still can't lose weight. That's where insulin resistance comes in, and it is causes so much stress in our body. So let's talk about what that is. I almost wish I could draw this on a whiteboard because I'm super visual, but close your eyes and picture this with me. So we know that when we eat a meal, especially a meal with carbohydrates, we get a rise in blood sugar. This is not a bad thing. This is very normal. Everybody freaks out and they're like, "Oh my God, this food's rising, making my blood
Yeah.
sugar go up." And I'm like, all carbs are going to make your blood sugar go up, just to different degrees, right? So if you eat an ice cream sandwich, it's going to make your blood sugar go way up, boost in energy maybe, and then way the hell down, and then you're going to feel like shit. Where, say, I eat an apple, it's still going to cause my blood sugar to rise, but not as high. It's going to rise and then it's going to stabilize and it's going to vibe, and we're going to have energy for a longer period of time before it more slowly comes down until we eat again. However, so obviously diet is a whole conversation here with that. I feel like
Yeah.
most of the people that I talk to that I know listen already do a great job with their diet, but diet's the first step. But what else raises our blood sugar? Stress raises our blood sugar.
Yeah.
So lots of things can cause stress and cause our liver to, our brain comes in and it says, hey, they need fuel now. So going too long without eating, not eating breakfast in the morning, having a very hard training session and not properly refueling. And then obviously we can get into a whole other slew of different stressors that makes your body think that it's being chased by a tiger, that it thinks it's dying, and that you're never going to eat again. But we know that's not really the case. But say you fast all night, you don't eat breakfast, and then you go work out. Where do you think your body's getting energy from? It's not just burning fat. It's not at all. It's actually possibly storing fat because it's stressed. But what else happens during this period of stress? And we'll use the example of fasting, not eating, and exercising. Your brain detects that you need fuel. You need carbs. You need glucose. It tells the liver, hey, spit out glucose. Glucagon is
Yeah.
high. You need glucose. So what the liver does is it breaks down glycogen and it spits out glucose back into our bloodstream, which if we were actually running from a tiger would be great, because then we would have some extra fuel and be able to run farther and faster. However, we're usually not. We're usually not. We're usually coming home from our workout, or we're sitting on our computer. We haven't eaten anything yet and we're really stressed or whatever it is. And our liver dumps glucose into the blood. What happens from there when glucose is entering the blood, whether it's from food or whether it's from the liver, or if we're starving, our muscles will be broken down, which is horrible. We don't want to ever get to that point, is insulin has to come in. So insulin rises, glucagon falls, and insulin takes the blood sugar, the glucose, and it goes to one of the many different insulin receptors. It's almost like a lock and key situation. We have all of these locks, the insulin receptors, all over our body, and or all our cells, I should say, and insulin is the key. However, at a certain, especially when we are chronically stressed, we live in fight or flight, we rely on caffeine, we always work out fasted, we drink too much coffee, we don't eat enough calories, we have a stressful job, we have kids yelling mom, whatever it is that is causing you stress all day, your body is constantly dumping sugar into your bloodstream, and then we eat because we have to eat to survive. So the answer
Yeah.
is not don't eat. You need to eat. You need to eat. But we eat, if we're eating a shitty diet, then we dump more sugar into our bloodstream. There are only so many locks. There's only so many places that insulin can go. So at a certain point, we have so much blood sugar. If we were to test your blood, go to the lab, test your blood, we have high blood glucose, high blood sugar. And at a certain point, eventually, we also have high insulin in the blood because there's nowhere else for insulin to go. And when we get to this point where both glucose and insulin are high, which I have been there, I've had very high insulin. And to talk about what should insulin be on our labs, first of all, doctors never run insulin. So if you have a family history of diabetes, ask them to run your fasting
Yeah.
insulin. Very important, or we can run it for you. We run this one for clients all the time because this is one that doctors almost never run. So what you'll want to see is your fasting insulin. Ideally, it should be, I like to say 3 to 8. Too low is a problem. Too low is it shows that there's stress, maybe an issue with your pancreas because the pancreas produces insulin. Too high, though, shows that insulin resistance. And the more insulin resistance that we have, the more free-floating glucose we have in the blood that is going to be stored as body fat eventually, right? And that is going to cause further metabolic issues. That is what leads to diabetes. It's not only a shit diet that leads to high blood sugar and insulin resistance. It is also chronic stress. And usually it's a combination of the two things. I know that sounds really scary. We're going to get into what you can do in order to help balance that out after we talk about what the impact is on your digestion. Because again, it's never one issue alone, right?
No.
Usually everything is connected, everything works together. And same thing with insulin resistance causing gut issues. It can be vice versa. If you have gut issues, you're likely going to also deal with insulin resistance because you can't process your fuel sources correctly. Did you have anything to add or any questions on that, Jess?
Honestly, I think that was a perfect description and very simple to understand. I honestly wouldn't add anything to that. I think the main thing is to understand that you can balance your blood sugar by using diet, lifestyle, and things like this to combat insulin resistance and high blood sugar as well.
Yeah, so we'll go over that and talk through like testing and all that in a minute. First, I wanted to dive into 5 ways that
Yeah,
today's lucky number is 5 because I feel like every podcast I'm like 5 things
I
for this.
know.
How having insulin resistance, high blood sugar can impact digestion and the importance
Yeah.
of supporting digestion. Because I think a lot of people will be told you're pre-diabetic, you have high blood sugar, or that your family has this, and we instantly just start doing things to balance our blood sugar. Fixing your gut balances your blood sugar is what I hope you
Yeah.
gather from this. If you fast forward till the end where we tell you what to do. So number one, and I'm going to try to keep these brief because we just did a whole nother podcast on a lot of this. When we have chronically high blood sugar, it damages, my favorite thing to talk about today, the vagus nerve, which again, we remember the vagus nerve plays a role in controlling motility of the digestive tract. So when we have high blood sugar, when we have insulin resistance, our gut motility is going to slow. We're going to have constipation. We might have consistent symptoms like bloating and nausea and early
Mhm.
satiety, getting full very quickly and feeling like can't eat much. So that's where these things go hand in hand: stress, insulin resistance, low appetite, slowed motility. So these things we can think about that go together. So without adequate function of the vagus nerve, when it is stressed, when there's inflammation due to high blood sugar, the stomach muscles aren't going to contract as they should. So even if you're eating enough food, your digestion is not going to be efficient. So big thing to consider here is malabsorption. So we're not going to absorb our nutrients well. You might notice increased food in your stool. And then we also will see number 2, which is low stomach acid or low gastric acid production. A lot of times when we talk about stomach acid, we just think of the actual acid. We think betaine, HCl, pepsin, things like that. But we also have to think about how that impacts our digestion as a whole. So when we have insulin resistance and high blood sugar, it is causing inflammation, inflammatory
Mhm.
cytokines like TNF alpha, IL-6, which suppress the production of gastric acid, which not only contains that betaine HCl and the pepsin, but it contains other gastric juices like bile that are going to help our body break down lipids and cholesterol and transport things around the body, right? Those transport proteins. So when we have this level of low grade inflammation or eventually high grade, it's going to be very hard to properly digest your food, especially to digest protein. So if
Yeah.
you are someone that feels like you can't eat a lot of protein at once, it bogs you down, it makes you way too full or even sluggish, you likely have reduced gastric acid production in your body. And other symptoms of this are going to be indigestion and bloating. So really making sure that we're managing our blood sugar so that way our GI tract can properly release gastrin, which is the hormone that stimulates stomach acid production from the parietal cells, as well as help us absorb all of our essential nutrients. And we can help our body by supplementing with some of these things. But again, even with supplements, if you don't have proper stomach acid levels, which we've done other episodes about this, then you're not going to absorb things correctly. And all of these different vitamins and minerals are essential for energy, cellular function, and the process of transporting carbs through GLUT4, GLUT2, all of these different transporters, which we won't get into right now, around the body. So this is where really working on the tips that we mentioned later to balance your blood sugar is going to be essential. Now, Jess, I would love for you to go over the next few with us, 3 and 4.
Yeah, blood sugar and insulin resistance are very related to gut dysbiosis and leaky gut. So when our clients have, say, for example, gut dysbiosis, so that be candida, any sort of high bacteria, we notice that they have intense cravings for sugar. And so harmful bacteria, they love sugar and they love high blood sugar in the body. And this can disrupt the gut's microbial balance even more. And like I said, dysbiosis is when there's an overgrowth of harmful bacteria, whether it's candida, another bacteria that can overpopulate and basically outpower the beneficial bacteria, creating this imbalance. And so this can often cause symptoms like gas, bloating, increased intestinal inflammation, and that can lead to more changes in your digestive health. The other thing that high blood sugar and insulin resistance can do is it can weaken the gut barrier and lead to leaky gut, which we talk about all the time. And it compromises the intestinal lining by disrupting tight junctions between cells, allowing for food to get into our bloodstream. And this can result in systemic inflammation. And like I said, when this occurs, undigested food, even toxins, pathogens, they can get through the gut lining and enter the bloodstream. So this can, of course, affect digestion, but it can also lead to other symptoms, fatigue, joint pain, food sensitivities, food allergies, and things like that. Is there anything that you would add to my little description there, Haley?
No, definitely. Especially when we talk dysbiosis, whether it's a bacterial overgrowth, a yeast overgrowth, or we can even go as far as saying like an infection, like a parasite, it is going to impact your body by it causes stress. So that's where the root cause of your insulin resistance could very well be gut dysbiosis.
Yeah.
It's one of those chicken or the egg situations. I find for a lot of individuals, this is how I was. I already had some insulin resistance probably because of stress and life and all the things that I did wrong with my journey. But then I also eventually had gut dysbiosis. So it exacerbated that blood sugar dysregulation. And it's like those two things battling inside of us. So that's where, if I always will say this, we take a very gut-centered approach, you need to address your GI health first. If you have shitty gut health and you're having insulin resistance, if you don't fix your gut, you're not going to fix your insulin resistance. And as Jess will mention with number 4, it impacts literally everything.
Yeah. So another big thing that I even noticed is you might notice with high blood sugar that you'll have periods of like real hunger, like ravenous hunger, and then periods where you're extremely full. And so high blood sugar and insulin resistance, it can really impact your hunger and fullness hormones. So we're talking about leptin and ghrelin here. So leptin, that is the fullness hormone. It's produced by fat cells and it signals to our brain when we're full. So it helps to basically regulate your fullness cues. But with insulin resistance and high blood sugar, the body will basically produce more fat cells, which leads to higher leptin levels. But like insulin, the body can become resistant to leptin. And so when the body becomes resistant, this is called leptin resistance, the brain doesn't recognize fullness signals very effectively anymore. So that's why you're probably going to feel hungry even after eating a full meal. And that can, of course, lead to overeating. And overeating, that cycle can lead to weight gain, furthering insulin resistance. The other hormone is ghrelin. This is the hunger hormone. So this is created in the stomach and it stimulates your appetite. Typically, ghrelin is going to rise before meals and then decrease afterwards, after you've eaten and you've gotten that fullness cue. However, like with high blood sugar and insulin resistance, it can again dysregulate that pattern. It can may lead to increasing ghrelin levels or just erratic ghrelin levels, like getting hungry at random times, for example, after you just finished a meal. So this is just your hunger cues. It can also result in cravings. So like high carb foods. So like when you get a low in your blood sugar, all you want is carbs, sugar. The first thing you're probably thinking about is whatever, bread, desserts, those high craving, highly palatable foods. And this can also worsen those blood sugar spikes and insulin resistance. So I think that was that a good description of our hunger and fullness signals there?
Yeah, no, that was great. And again, it's one of those things, chicken or the egg, because gut issues are going to exacerbate this. So instead of viewing these things like, oh shit, all this is going to happen to me, really take inventory of which of these that you feel, of the things that we've talked about, or what symptoms you have. And again, if you haven't already done so, you can take our gut quiz. It takes literally 2 minutes, and that'll give you a bit of a better idea of what might be causing some of your imbalances in your gut, whether it's low stomach acid, leaky gut, dysbiosis, all of that, because symptoms are signs from our body. So when we talk a lot about symptoms, the goal isn't to scare you, it's to educate you. So that way, you know, okay, these things are coming up. I'm having gut issues. I need to take the right steps before it leads into something more like insulin resistance, vice versa. So number
Yeah.
5, the last one to look out for when it comes to how blood sugar negatively impacts the gut is pressure on the esophageal sphincter, or acid reflux is usually how it presents. So a lot of people think that acid reflux is an issue with too much stomach acid. It usually isn't. Usually it is a result of weakening of that lower esophageal sphincter. So if you're not watching the video, you can see I'm pointing to like the base of my neck where that lower esophageal sphincter hangs out. It's responsible for opening, closing at the right time when we're trying to swallow foods, and staying opening when we're trying to swallow, and staying closed otherwise. Where the issue really comes in with insulin resistance, especially with abdominal obesity, it places a lot more pressure on that lower esophageal sphincter, which from there allows acid to rise and splash back up into the esophagus. So this is where we'll see GERD or acid reflux, and that irritation of the esophagus, which can cause inflammation and long-term damage. So by regulating blood sugar, we can avoid this, but also it is a bit of a sign to look out for. If you do deal with reflux, we're going to want to make sure that we're addressing the root cause of it from a gut standpoint, and also supporting the balance of blood sugar to help reduce this issue over time. A big thing to focus on if you have high blood glucose, if you have insulin resistance. And again, you can suspect this by symptoms, but this is one thing that I would say test, don't guess, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself freaking nuts. And I often have clients that are like, should I get a CGM? Should I get a consistent glucose monitor? Honestly, my answer is usually no, because those things, sometimes too much
Yeah.
data is stressful. And those things are a fuck ton of data. For someone like myself or Jess, I think they would be helpful because we can differentiate, hey, my blood sugar is supposed to spike right now because I just ate. Versus I've had clients or potential clients come to me and be like, every single food spikes my blood sugar. And I'm like, homie, your blood sugar is supposed to spike. That is normal. We just need to understand
Yeah.
when to look at it. So this is
Yeah.
where I usually will say, hey, let's start with getting some serum labs, go to a lab, go to your
Yeah.
doctor. We'll get blood sugar, fasting blood glucose, we'll
Yeah.
get A1C
Insulin.
and maybe some other markers there. And
Got a
then
good idea.
I often will recommend the finger prick. If you're able to, you can get a glucometer on Amazon. I have a couple that I really like, and I'll have my girls do that a few times a week and go through the process of the right way to do that to get an accurate reading. So that way we can just get a baseline, because measuring your blood glucose is very similar to measuring your weight or stepping on a scale. It's going to be different every day, and it is based on so many different things. Like we talked about at the beginning, we already know how much stress impacts our blood sugar, and our stress levels are different day to day. The things that we eat are sometimes different. The phase of our menstrual cycle impacts our blood sugar regulation as well for us ladies in the group, right? So there's a lot that goes into our blood sugar. It's not just one thing, but doing the finger prick a couple days a week in a fasted state is fantastic. So is doing it postprandial, right? So again, if you test your blood sugar right after you eat, or even an hour after you eat, it's going to be really high, very high
Yeah,
and scary. So don't do it. When we want to test it is, I would say, 2 to 3 hours after.
yeah,
So that's when we would get a postprandial, post meal reading. That's when glucagon and insulin can have done their thing and we've stabilized. So
yeah.
if you test your sugar, maybe do a couple days per week of the fasting, write them down, get a couple weeks worth of data, at least 2 weeks. Again, it's going to vary drastically depending on a lot of variables. And then maybe get a couple postprandials, because somebody can have elevated fasting sugar, but normal postprandial. And that tells us a lot about what we need to do from a coaching standpoint. But we've covered a lot about like the negatives of high blood sugar and insulin resistance and their impact on digestion. But the big thing again is really just focusing on doing what you can in your day-to-day routine to support digestion. And
Yeah.
if we do things to support digestion, it ends up supporting our blood sugar anyway. Really, it does go both ways. Jess, I would love for you to give us some tips and actionable advice as far as what can you do to support your blood sugar, whether it's an issue or not, because this is something we should really all be doing. 90% of the time, again, 10% of the time, go have your ice cream. Go enjoy your palatable treat.
Yeah.
Skip breakfast because you're in a rush. It happens to the best of us. Nobody's perfect, but I would say 80-90% of the time, these are some things that we can do to balance that.
Yeah, we always harp on the basics, but like the basics are, we're always just come back to them because they help with everything. But the first thing I would say is yes, diet is important. So some of the things with diet, just balancing your meals. So Haley talked earlier about having an apple versus an ice cream sandwich. Like one is going to raise your blood sugar much more. However, balancing that apple, or say the ice cream sandwich, with some fats and some proteins, that is also going to help stabilize your blood sugar response as well. So that's why one of the reasons why you hear a lot of the time balance your meals with balance a carb with a fat, balance a carb, fat, and protein, right? Like whatever is going to work with you. But for snacks, it's usually protein and a carb, but protein and a fat. Something like that. The other big thing is that I love to use is meal timing. Try your best. This is what I used to do. I would go hours without eating. It's not beneficial because if anything, your body is just storing and waiting for you to eat again. And that's when even me, if I wait too long, I will still have a spike or a low in blood sugar and a spike in blood sugar after I eat, right? So making sure every 3 to 4 hours, depending on your motility. Every 3 to 4 hours is a good range. Most of my clients have 3 meals and a snack, for example, and they time those appropriately instead of like having all of your meals at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. I've found the most success with myself and with my clients to eat throughout the day and find that consistent pattern that works for you. Another practice is just eating mindfully. We talk a lot about meal hygiene, scarfing your meal down, eating in a rush. Like those are things that can impact our blood sugar. So, really getting yourself whatever you need to do, which is going to look different for everyone, whatever you need to do to relax and get into a parasympathetic state before eating is going to be really important. Moving your body after meals. This is whether it's like you're walking around in your apartment or going to the grocery store, whatever it is, try and get some movement in after, or I would wait a couple minutes, but try and get in some movement. And so those are the main ones that you can start doing right away. What would you add, Haley?
No, I agree. And I think just like we preach with all of our episodes here, it is really just choosing one thing at a time, because I
Yeah,
know that list that we gave you is a lot, but it's really looking at what you're doing now and seeing what you can do to complement that already. Because odds are you're already doing some of these things. Another thing
Mhm.
is going to be making sure that you're adding variety to your diet and adding adequate amounts of fiber. That's going to be
Yeah,
another big one, especially if you already know you have issues with your blood sugar, or maybe you have a family member that's diabetic, which I'm sure everybody listening to this does. Very
yes,
curious.
yeah.
I know like the majority of my family is, like I mentioned earlier, is very diabetic. These are something you can suggest to them, making sure that you're increasing high fiber foods in your diet. And that could literally just be fruit. It doesn't have to be this whole ordeal of making oatmeal every morning or whatever it is, but there are specific foods that are going to cause blood sugar to rise less than others. So really understand understanding what those are, finding what you like, and having those simple swaps. The other thing, again, I really want to drive home is that you don't have to be perfect. Every once in a while, you go out to breakfast and instead of ordering the egg white omelet with the whole wheat toast, get the damn pancake. Yes, it contains more sugar.
Yeah.
It's going to digest a little bit faster and raise your blood sugar, but you're going to be fine. It's not going to kill you, especially if, like I know you are, you're already doing most of the things. The big thing, again, is going to be, I would say, that I hope you take from this and can share with somebody else that would benefit is making sure that if you're having issues with your digestion now, that you don't wait, you address them. You dive deeper, you figure out what that is. Because I know a lot of people think, oh my God, I have an issue with digestion. I'm going to need a protocol. I'm going to need this whole $1,000 ordeal. And that's usually not the case. Honestly, we have a
Yeah.
lot of girls that in the first 3 months, they almost notice total resolution of symptoms just by working on their basic habits and stress and changing up their diet and a few support supplements. So the big thing is not making small things into big things. I tend to do that and get very overwhelmed very quickly. So just choosing some small steps to take, asking for help if you need it, doing what you can to keep digestive health healthy. And if you're not sure what to do, go listen to all of our other episodes because the majority of them are about gut health. And then really just doing your best to take care of blood sugar, but also figure out why it's high to begin with, right? Because especially if you're somebody that feels like you already have a really balanced diet, and this is how I was, when my blood sugar was very high at right after college and even through grad school, I was doing all the things. I had just competed in bodybuilding. I was eating plenty of food, very great food quality 90% of the time, but I still had high blood sugar and insulin resistance. And it was related to the amount of stress that I was under mentally, physically, but also from my gut microbiome because I had GI infections. I had the SIBO, I had the candida, I had all these things, inflammatory cascade in the body. So the big thing is really just like we always talk about, finding that full picture and putting together the puzzle pieces to see what is actually causing your issues and where do you need to put most of your focus.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. So if you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. Again, send it to a friend, chat with us on Instagram. I would love to hear your experience if you have any with all of this. And if you like this episode, make sure you let us know. But thank you so much for hanging out with us today.